Creativity has a way of turning little dreams into something you can hold in your hands. And this is the inspiration behind Sonnet's Garden Bloom's June Maker's Box. And with the celebration of the Maker's Box 3rd anniversary, I was tasked or challenged to flip 5 items from a scavenger hunt list, which included a box, a sign, a tray, a basket, and a planter. For the project, we'll be using recycled time-worn tin tile and worn porch plan. From Connie, the painted photographer, we'll be using Whispers Through Time and Moments in Motion. From Sweet Pickins Milk Paint, we'll be using Gumdrop. And from DIY Paint, Old 57 and Summer Crush. For Fusion Mineral Paint, we'll be using Raw Silk, Victorian Lace. Sonnet always includes a thank you card and a napkin. And for the anniversary, she's designed her own decoupage paper. So let's roll up our sleeve and let's get creating. Project 1, I chose this cheese box, which is about 15 inches in diameter, and it's definitely seen its better days. I started out by using the Raw Silk by Fusion Paint, and I painted the sides of the box. Using Crinoline by Rust-Oleum, I painted the top of the box. I usually use a cheaper paint when I am decoupaging over an area. I mixed up some gumdrop with a 1-to-1 powder to water ratio, and I let it sit for a few minutes. Then I painted the sides of the lid of the hat box or cheese box. I also painted the bottom border of the cheese box with the milk paint, and it does usually take 2 coats of milk paint. I chose the robin that Sonnet designed for the lid of the cheese box. I knew it was too big. It's a really big piece of paper. So I did have to cut it down, and unfortunately I wasn't able to use the clock or the bottom part of the robin. I sized up the paper and misted it. It loosens up the fibers if you just give it a quick mist, and helps minimize wrinkling. I then chose to use DIY liquid patina, and I started with the top, and I applied part of the patina, the liquid patina, to like 1/3, 1/4 of the top of the hat or cheese box. I don't know why I call it a hat box. And I just worked my way down with the liquid patina, adhering a section. Then I just moved on to the next section. I would just gently use my fingers to help smooth out the wrinkles. Once the decoupage paper was adhered to the top of the cheese box, I used my scissors and I just trimmed around the edges. And I will save those edges, Extra pieces of decoupage paper always comes in handy for smaller projects. I then used a thin layer of the liquid patina on top of the decoupage paper to seal the project. Using a lighter, and yes, I do not recommend doing this inside. It's one of those do as I say, not as I do. But I do have water on hand. I lit the edges of the decoupage paper on fire, and I just worked my way around the whole box. I like the way the flame stops once it hits the decoupage medium, and I like that rustic burnt edges that this method creates. Using Fusion's antiquing gel, I applied a layer around the whole box. I let it sit about 5 minutes, and I just used a paper towel to wipe off the excess. The project is sealed and complete. For project 2, I used a basket I picked up at a garage sale, and what I didn't get on film is I used the Gumdrop Sweet Pickins milk paint and applied it to the basket with a dry brush. Choosing some florals from an IOD transfer set, I gently applied the transfers, to one on each side, to the basket. I just rubbed the transfer in with a stick and peeled up as I went, and it did apply really nicely to that uneven surface of the basket. After applying the transfer, I just gently peeled off the back and varnished the transfer into the sides of the basket. I also did this on the other side of the basket with a different floral print. I sealed the basket and the transfer with a DIY liquid patina. For project 3, I'm using this sign I picked up at our local Goodwill. I did use an electric sander to sand it down, and using the Rust-Oleum chalk paint, I am covering up the front of the sign. I want to kind of mask out that maroon color from bleeding through. Plus, when I use the rice paper, it just helps give it a brighter look. So I did give the sign a coat of chalk paper as a base. Using DIY Old 57, I went around the edges of the sign. I did give it 2 coats. I cut out one of the smaller portions of the Motion in Time by Connie, the painted photographer. I actually had started to do the wet method first when I realized I needed to cut out the portion I was using. Once I got it cut out, I just dipped a brush in water and I went around the edges of kind of like in an oval shape. and I ripped it out. This way, one, it'll fit better onto the sign, and two, with the jagged edges, it's easier to blend in to the background. I sprayed the back of the rice paper, and using the DIY liquid patina, I applied the rice paper to the sign portion of the wood. I just used my fingers to help spread it out. Connie uses DIY paint to paint the images by hand on the rice paper. So I chose to use the DIY burlap with some of the raw silk by Fusion to tap out and blend in the paper. I also noticed that there was an orange tone to it with the brown, so I mixed up the Summer Crush with some weathered wood. I watered it down and flicked it right on top of the paper. And once it dried, it blended in rather well. I used an IOD, I think it's the newspaper press. I stamped Faith right on top of the dry rice paper. I did let it dry. And I just firmly pressed the word Faith on top of the sign. Using a baby wipe, I wet distressed the edges of the sign. I sealed the sign with DIY liquid patina. Using Fusion's antiquing gel, I covered the edges of the sign with the brown gel, let it sit for about 5 minutes, and used a paper towel to wipe off the excess. The sign is sealed, and it also had a sawtooth hook on the back, so it is ready to be hung. Project 4, I had picked up this little piggy cutting board, which I thought served as a tray. I painted the top white with crinoline by Rust-Oleum chalk paint. I painted the edges and the back of the board with DIY Old 57, and I did give it 2 coats. And I still have plenty of paint left over. So there is a lot of pigment in that paint. And even though it doesn't look like you're getting a lot, you actually get quite a bit. Once that was dry, I chose to use Royce's Worn Porch Planks decoupage paper, and I cut out a section, misted it with a water bottle. Using DIY liquid patina, I applied the decoupage paper to the piggy. And for those who don't know, I used to have a pet potbelly pig, so I really like my pig projects, and I try to transform a pig whenever I find one out in the wild. I just worked my way down in sections, applying the liquid patina, using my hands to press down the decoupage paper. I used a scissors to trim the excess off, giving it a little bit of a border around the cutting board. I used a DIY liquid patina to seal the paper onto the board. Using my finger sander, I went up and down motion, sanding the excess paper off of the project. I used my little weeding tool to poke a hole into the piggy's tail, and I was able to punch out that excess paper. And then I used a little DIY Old 57 to paint inside the paper. Using the farmhouse stamps by IOD, I just laid out the word oink. Using a white ink by IOD, I stamped oink onto the back of the board. To help set the ink and get out a little bit of the wrinkles, I used a heat press, a little handheld heat press, and it helps, one, get out the wrinkles if you have any excess wrinkles, and it helped set that ink into the project. I applied IOD transfers sealed with DIY liquid patina. I wasn't sure if my pig was actually considered a tray since it was a cutting board. So I grabbed this silver tray I got from Cindy at Sparks of Vintage from our last Flippin' Frenzy, and I applied the extra bond from Sweet Pickins over the tray using the Connie method so I could get crackles. This project is inspired a lot by Connie, the painted photographer, one from a previous tray she did. And also I added some Love Bug by Sweet Pickins to the gumdrop to give it more of a green color. Once it was dried after 2 coats, I used a baby wipe to wet distress the tray. I chose a couple transfers from one of the IOD's newest releases. I picked out a bird and some florals, and I just gently rubbed the transfer onto the tray and varnished it right on in. And using the same process, I added the florals to the edge of the tray. And I am curious, do you think the cutting board counted as a tray? I wasn't sure, so I just used this one as a backup, and it actually turned out to be one of my favorite projects. Using Fusion's Antiquing Gel, I covered the tray. I would normally use the Sweet Pickins oil as a sealer because it gets into those cracks really nice, but I didn't know if I had enough. I forgot to order more because I use it a lot. So I did use the Fusion Antiquing Gel, and it did get in the cracks really well. And once it was dried, it was sealed. I was able to place a hanger on the back. For project 6, I'm using this little wood, well, I consider it a planter, And I covered the whole thing in the Rust-Oleum crinoline. I gave it only one coat and I allowed it to dry. Using weathered wood by DIY, I stained the inside of the planter. I added some weathered wood and then I used a baby wipe to stain it. Using weathered wood, I painted the metal portion of the handle and I dabbed on some of the Summer Crush by DIY, another method I used from Connie to get kind of that rusted age effect. I then painted the outline or edges and the bottom of the planter with DIY Old 57. Using the Old 57, I painted the wooden handle I chose liquid patina again as my decoupage medium, and I went around actually in sections with the squares because of the rounded surface of the planter. It wasn't like I could just easily lay on the paper. I just used the squares from the time-worn tin tile from Roycycle Decoupage and just made my way around the planter using the liquid patina. I would mist the paper with water, apply liquid patina. Using a sanding sponge, I was able to sand off the excess of the decoupage paper. And this one was a little bit more complicated just due to the pattern of the tiles and the curved surfaces. I applied Roses by IOD, and I applied one on both surfaces, and it also kind of helped hide, using the larger transfers, it kind of helped hide the uneven portions of the decoupage paper, or edges, I guess you could say, of the decoupage paper. Kind of helped mask my edges. I sanded the wooden portion of the handle. Sealed the handle with the Fusion antiquing gel. I gave it a good coating, I let it sit, and I used a paper towel to take off the excess. And after it was, I forgot. I did use the antiquing gel over the edges and the bottom of the planter to seal the DIY paint. And what I don't show is I'm spraying the inside of the planter with, now I can't think what it's called, a hard plastic to protect it. And I can leave that link in the description. I would love to know which one of these projects is your favorite, and I'd also like to know if you think the piggy cutting board counted as a tray, or did I redeem myself with the metal tray? And this Wednesday, June 17th, we will be going live with a Whatnot raid train selling the items from our Creative Makers box in celebration of the 3-year anniversary, and I'll be live at noon. If you found this video inspirational, Please hit subscribe below and follow me along on my creative journey. Thank you.